I think we'll get started. I said 6:30 and it's 6:29-ish. Welcome. Thank you for coming out tonight. This is one of two information sessions we're doing for potential candidates and registered candidates for the school board and council election coming up, municipal election, October 27th. We have partnered with the town of Oakville to offer the sessions. This session we're hosting in Burlington, and there'll be another session in September that the town of Oakville is hosting. Will be the same information, so if you've come now, you can come again if you want, but just if you happen to be talking to people who couldn't make it tonight or something, there will be another session. As well, this session is being webcast, so it will be on our website probably sometime tomorrow. So you can refer back to it if there's something you want to see again, or once again, if you've talked to somebody who couldn't make it tonight, it is being webcast. So. I'm just going to spend a minute to introduce some of the folks that have come out tonight to help us with this information session. We have also invited the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing representatives here, and they will be doing the first part of this session, which is a lot of the financial information that you need as a candidate, as well as some other information that you can find in the Municipal Elections Act. So we have Diane Floss here, who's our municipal advisor for our area, and names, I've got all the names. Rebecca Augustine, who is an assistant municipal advisor, and Rebecca is over there. From the town of Oakville, we have Vicki Titanic. She's the acting town clerk. Kim Galleoni is the manager of elections. Bob DeHooge is the road corridor permit coordinator. It's a lot of C's. I think that means he's kind of the sign guy in Oakville, right? And from the city of Burlington, oh wait, we have somebody else from, oh, she's outside, okay. So, and Trista McCready is their election coordinator in Oakville. She was at the registration desk there. From the city of Burlington, we have Danielle Patosha. She's the manager of elections. There's Danielle. And Amber Lapointe is the elections officer. So some of you may have met Amber and Danielle already, and I'm Angela Morgan, the city clerk for the city of Burlington. So just a couple questions to see who we have in the audience. So just a show of hands, I'm not recording. You know, if you change your mind, you don't have to stick with the answer. How many are interested in the audience and running for council for either Burlington or Oakville? Okay. And how many are interested in running for school board? Or representing somebody running for school board. So we've got two school board. And how many are running in either for school board or council in the town of Oakville? We got one. Okay, good stuff. Just so we can make sure we tailor our presentation. So, so first off, we're going to do the ministry overview. So I'm going to ask Diane to come up and get started on oh, and before Diane gets started, we're going to save all the questions till the end, because sometimes your question might get answered in a few slides up. So I think it'll save some time if we save them to the end. And our goal is to be out by 8:30. So, okay.
So two things that you have to note is I could speak until 10 o'clock tonight on this, but I will not, and I'm going to make sure that I am very succinct on a few slides that are sort of the exception rather than the rule. When I heard it was webcast, I thought, well, maybe I should just leave now and not say anything. We're in a strange period now in our ministry. Anyways, I am the municipal advisor that, right now I'm the municipal advisor covering Central Ontario region. Normally, when we are fully staffed up in our office, I cover Muskoka, Toronto, York, and Durham. But I have had Halton region at times in my stead at the ministry. Anyways, I just want to bring three pieces of information to your attention. I think they're really important tools that you need to access. I understand that they're readily available to you. The first one is our ministry every election pulls together a guide. And this year, this guide is probably the best I have ever seen. It's easy to read. It's like reading a novel. Believe it or not, it's interesting. And it really has a lot of great examples. So quite often, if I skim over something, I am going to suggest that you just look to the guide and use that as a reference. The other thing is the Municipal Elections Act, and again, you can access that through the Ministry e-laws website. I'm not sure if the girls have it loaded on their website, a link there, but again, these are things that are very important to you right now. And then finally, there's a series of forms. Starting with Form 1, if you folks have already become nominated for your campaign, you'll be familiar with Form 1. But there are a series of forms, and I would strongly recommend that you have a look at all of them. But if there's any one form that you do need to spend particular attention on, and it's called a Form 4, and this is the form that you will use to file your financial submission at the end of your campaign. And if you have a look at it now, it gives you a really good sense of how to manage your campaign and how to manage your finances, your expenses, the contributions, all those types of things. So three things right out of the top I want to really encourage you to do. Thank you very much to Oakville and to Burlington for inviting us to be here. And I am going to ask any of the folks from Burlington, Oakville, we love to do this as a team effort. There are parts of our legislation where the municipalities are allowed to tailor pieces of the legislation. So I'm just going to, really invite Kim and Angela and the rest of the crew to please just pop up and chime in where you have specific procedures. So please don't be afraid when they start popping up like, little whack-a-mole things. Anyways, going on to the disclaimer slide. Just want to comment that what we're presenting to you today is a summary. It is the legislation. You can see the materials that I've already sort of just shown to you. There is a lot. We can't give it to you all at once. So this is a summary, and I would encourage you to go back to the official records if you need further information. The other thing you're going to find is at some point during your campaign, you may need specialized advice from somebody who has a specialization in municipal law or in accounting practices. So don't be afraid to try to find those connections now, so that if you do need that information, you've got it at your fingertips. The municipal staff who work on the election really focus on the integrity of the vote, and it's very difficult for them to get involved, or it can be complicated for them to get involved in the weeds of the campaigning. So I offer my contact information up to you folks. Certainly I would encourage you to speak with your local officials too, but if there's something that they would prefer us to answer, I have no problem taking calls on a regular basis or emails. My contact information is at the back of our presentation, which will be loaded on the elections website for both municipalities. There will be some topics that we are going to gloss over, and I'm going to tell you right up front when we get to those slides that I'm just going to skim them. And the reason I'm going to skim them is, one, they don't happen all the time. They're exceptions rather than rules. They're rules for exceptional things that happen. Or they are things that the municipality has the responsibility to tailor. So some of the things that I will skim over or not even cover at all. Signs. The responsibility for signs is solely that of the local and the upper tier municipality, and you have the responsibility to find out through those two levels of government those particular rules. Alternative voting methods, and when a municipality chooses to use a tabulator, they are walking into the realm of using alternative voting methods. It's nothing to be afraid of. Most municipalities are using them today. But when that happens, the municipal clerk is responsible for writing very specific rules and regulations surrounding those things. So they are tailoring those to their specific needs. So I can't speak to that. Municipal rebate programs, I know Oakville has that. I can't answer questions on a rebate program. Use of municipal resources for incumbents who are also running in this particular election. Each municipality will have their own policy for those things, and you'll have to speak to the municipality about that. Proxy forms are another item where the municipality has the ability to tailor practices and procedures, and scrutineers. So those are some things I'm just going to touch lightly on and may ask the other folks to stand up and talk about. What we are going to cover, we're going to talk about council staff roles, nominations, key dates and processes, voters lists and proxy voting, scrutineers, recounts. You can read the list. I think what I really want to stress here is there is an awful lot, and you have a clerk's department and a bunch of staff who are working very hard to ensure the integrity of the vote. And the clerk of the municipality is in charge of the municipal election, nobody else. And they have very broad authority in order to manage that election and run the election for the municipality. I talked about some resources that you may want to access, and I would encourage you to continue to have a look at those. So council staff relations. I just want to make sure that you understand what your role, and for the folks who are running for the school board, when I say council staff, when I talk about municipal, unless I specifically say there's different rules for the school board, it's the same for you. It's my lingo, I guess. I'm not used to always saying school board. So for example, I want to make sure you understand what your role will be. As a council, as an elected trustee, your role is to govern, to set policy, to make decisions, and to ensure the financial integrity of your organizations, and to evaluate or navel gaze so that you can strategically plan for your organization. What you are not responsible for, but it is the responsibility of the administration or staff or bureaucracy, however you want to refer to that, it's their responsibility to do research, to provide advice and recommendations, and to implement municipal and provincial policies. There are a ton of pieces of legislation. There are 750 pieces of legislation that touch a municipality. So those are rules and regulations that a municipality has to follow. And the staff are the ones that have the awareness of those particular policies and things that you need to be, that you need to know, and they usually reflect that in their decisions or their advice to you. And finally, they're the ones who manage the day-to-day operations of the municipality or the school board. Those are not things that are meant for an elected official. Nominations. Nominations could be submitted from the first day the municipality was open in January to the final day that those can be submitted is Friday, September 12th at 2 p.m. If a candidate withdraws from the election, they need to notify the clerk in writing no later than 2 p.m. on that nomination day, September 12th. If you do withdraw your nomination, you are entitled to a refund of your nomination filing fee. Just may take a little while for you to get it. There may be a delay. Might be after the election, once things calm down a little. The other thing that you need to note is the clerk is responsible for certifying the nominations. And certifying the nominations just means that on that day, the candidates who are nominated for the positions are eligible to be nominated. Okay? Next slide. Candidates must, in order to become nominated to run in either the school board or into the municipal election, candidates must complete what's called a Form 4. And you're going to hear me say a couple times through the slide, we have a form for that. You know, it's kind of like you have an app for that. We have a form for that. And you can usually access those forms through your municipality. You file the Form 1, you complete it, and oftentimes you are required to attend the municipality and show identification. The clerk must be satisfied that you are eligible to run, and the nomination form must have an original signature. When you do attend the municipality to file your nomination, you need to bring your nomination filing fee, and it's $200 for the head of council or $100 for other offices. And again, just remember that you may be required to provide proof of or identity. Withdrawal nomination. Again, I'm just going to quickly skim over this. It's an exception. If somebody decides to withdraw, we've quickly talked about it, they're still, they need to do that by that September 12th, 2 p.m. deadline. It is recommended, and some municipalities require that you attend in person. So that I'm seeing the nods. You are required to attend in person in order to withdraw your nomination. One of the things I'm going to stress again a lot through this presentation, and there are some repetitive pieces just because they are important. You may hear part of it the first time, part of it the second time, so on and so forth. But even if you withdraw your nomination, you are required to file the financial papers because you did have a campaign at some point. Okay? So just so you know that. And again, I'm going to refer you back to the guide. There's lots of information on that. Another piece of information I'm just going to skim over, because again, it doesn't happen very often. Sometimes a candidate changes his mind as to where, their mind as to, and they want to run for a different office. You are permitted to do that. However, you can only run for one office at any one time. So what happens is if you take your nomination paper in for, say, Ward 1, and then a little while later you go in and you change that to Ward 5, once you submit your nomination papers for Ward 5, you are deemed to be resigned from running in the Ward 1 seat. Okay? Now, what happens is you have, in essence, begun 2 campaigns. You must file 2 financial filings, one for the campaign in Ward 1 and one for the campaign in Ward 5. The other thing you have to remember is any funds that you have raised for the Ward 1 campaign that you are no longer running in cannot be transferred to your other campaign. You need to start over again. Just let me make sure here I'm covering everything. I have covered that. Okay, so we're going to move on to key dates. Slide number 10. Nomination day, as we noted, is Friday, September 12th. And that's the last day in which you can file, and it's the last day in which you can withdraw to your nomination. The clerks will certify the nominations on September 15th. Voting day, as you are aware, is Monday, October 27th. And a campaign period, I'm just going to use that, there's a definition. A campaign period is a time when the candidate can accept contributions and incur election expenses. And that is the date in which you filed your papers to run, and that runs until December 31st, 2014. There is an exception. If leading up to December 31st, 2014, you find your campaign is still in a deficit, you have the ability to file a Form 6, remember we have a form for that, and extend your campaign so you can continue to raise funds to reduce that deficit. But you must get that Form 6 into the municipal office in person. And that needs to be done before December 31st, 2014. So you need to sort of watch your campaign finances and watch your campaign, the funds you've raised, the expenses you have, what you may still have coming in. Regardless of whether you are running what I call a normally dated campaign or an extended campaign, you will be required to file your first and maybe your final financial filing. So if you have a normal campaign, you are required to submit your financial filing for your campaign from the day you were nominated to December 31st on March 27th, 2015 by 2 p.m. If you've extended your campaign, then you are obligated to submit a second financial filing on September 25th, 2015, which represents the period of time between January 1st, 2015 and June 30th, 2015. And June 30th is when that extended campaign, that extended opportunity to fundraise ends. Questions? Good. Voters list. I want to sort of just note here, I'm going to give you the legislative pieces on some slides coming up, but I'm going to note that there may be very municipal-specific things, and I'm going to encourage the girls, if they want to pop up and add their piece, to please do that. So the voters list. Every candidate is eligible to get one copy. And the requests, and again, every candidate will get one copy. And the voters list is a very important document, and it needs to be taken really seriously. It shall not be posted in a public place, and it is it's a document that you want to keep secured and carefully guarded. And anybody who you have who are working with that document, they also have to understand this.
And based on that security that Diane just mentioned, we in Oakville provide the voters list electronically to our candidates. They are required to sign an oath, and that security is paramount in terms of who has access to that information electronically and where it is kept. Thanks.
Same. Okay, very, very same. There are other folks who are able to request a copy of the campaign, but I don't necessarily need to get through that. You can research that if that's of interest to you. The voters list is available September 2nd. Okay? People think that they should be getting it now. It's not ready now. There's also a second version of the voters list that will also be made available September 22nd, and that's when all the what becomes final on September 22nd?
It's the interim changes made.
That's right.
To the voters list, but the time frame for the interim list is different. It used to be when the election was held in November.
Yes.
There was a wider period of time for having changes to deletions of people from the voters list, and that is a short period of time that got kind of missed in the legislation.
Sorry.
So now it's 20 days later.
We goofed.
Instead of almost a month and a half
Right.
later.
The other thing I should note is right now there's and I will get to this a little later in the slide, so why don't I just leave it. But I am going to say the voters list is a fluid document. It is always a fluid document. It is fluid up until Election Day. There are still people who will show up at the poll to have their name added. Okay? There are specific forms, there's specific procedures, and I would recommend that you chat, if you want to understand that a little better, you chat specifically with your municipality. Moving on to slide number 13, MPAC voter lookup. Now, I was talking a little bit about the fact that the voters list is not available right now. What is available is called a preliminary list of electors. And right now, it's the property of MPAC, which is the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. And right now, you can have a look at that preliminary list of electors through this website, mpacvoterlookup.ca. And you do have an opportunity to see if you're on the voters list, to make corrections. For example, my mother moved from one municipality to another, so I worked with her online to make sure that she got on the current voters list where she moved to. Or on, not the voters list, the preliminary list of electors. And I think that it's really important that you understand it's fluid right now. MPAC does their thing for a period of time, and I'm not going to get into the deadlines and the details or the dates because it is it's a bit of a moving target depending on your municipality. In September, the preliminary list of electors becomes the property of the municipality. And at that time, they have the ability to continue to massage, add, delete, and perfect what will become the voters list. And that happens, as I said, right up till October 27th. And so if you want to know some of the dates and some of the procedures, I would recommend that you, of what to do in order to add somebody or take somebody or delete somebody from the voters list, check with the municipality. Okay? Proxy forms. And again, proxy forms are another thing where there is a legislated portion and the municipality also has the ability to specify details surrounding the proxy form. Basically, a proxy form allows somebody who may be unable to vote in the advanced poll or in the regular poll. They're unavailable or they're physically not well enough to do it, to go, to give their vote or their proxy to another person. No proxy appointments, and again, there is a form for that. You have to remember that. No proxies can be made until close of nominations, and a voter must directly appoint another eligible voter by name in his or her proxy. A person may only exercise one proxy to one individual, take on a proxy, from an individual, or can take on a series of proxies for family members, a spouse, a sibling, a parent, child, grandparent, grandchild. So, for example, if I take on your proxy, I can only take on your proxy, I'm done. But if mom and dad and my sister needed me to take on their proxy, I could take on all three, one or the other. Okay? The process basically includes somebody self-identifying that they want a proxy. They contact the municipality and request a form. The person who's giving that proxy fills in the form, and the person who they have given the voting ability or the proxy to then has to take the form to the municipality to be certified. These rules have been tightened up quite considerably because there was a lot of misuse. What was happening was people were walking around and campaigning with piles of 50 proxies and taking proxies on as they were campaigning. Anything you guys like to add?
We don't like to give out proxy forms.
Yeah, most municipalities do not like to give out proxy forms, and they will not. Some will not. Some don't like to. It all depends on their rules. Give them out to candidates. Do you give them out or not?
It depends. We do, but very limited quantities because of the issue that you just described.
Perfect. Yeah. We'll hold that to the end. Yep. Some municipalities won't do it at all. So it's again, it's a local choice. Scrutineers. Again, this is something else where there is basic legislation, and the municipality has the ability to very specifically detail rules and regulations and procedures related to scrutineers. Does everybody know what a scrutineer is? Yeah, they're basically meant to be in a polling place watching over the vote on your behalf. A scrutineer is permitted to be in a voting place, or a candidate may be in a voting place. If a candidate attends a voting place and there is a scrutineer there, that scrutineer must leave. It can be one or the other. It can't be both. On my slides, there is no age restriction. From a legislative perspective, there isn't. However, we do know that municipalities can tailor it, and we do know that Oakville specifically has an age restriction. I think what's really important here is that you don't send in your 11-year-old nephew who's just going to want to play, count the ceiling tiles. They're there to do a job, and a very serious job, and they're representing your campaign, so you want somebody who is responsible. They also are required to have written proof of authorization from the candidate. The clerk may require an oath of secrecy. And during in a regular election process, where they're not using tabulators, it's one ballot box per scrutineer. Again, because there are tabulators involved here, the clerks would have had the responsibility of writing those rules and regulations, and you need to understand those. There's no campaigning in the voting place, so that scrutineer can't have colors and buttons and can't interfere with voters coming in or leaving, all of that kind of stuff. I think you understand. It's an integrity of secrecy and all of that sort of stuff. Anything else you'd like to add? Nope.
We actually provide an appointment scrutineer form
Okay.
to make it easier for candidates, and then it's also easier for any election officials to recognize on the day of the election.
Okay. Good. Thank you. The next one, recounts. Just going to go quickly. Recounts happen. If there's a tie vote, it's automatic. Otherwise, there are two other ways in which a recount can happen. A council can pass a resolution to obligate the clerk to hold a recount. And that needs to be passed within 30 days of the clerk declaring the election results. Another way in which a recount can happen is if an eligible elector applies to the Superior Court of Justice within 30 days of that of the clerk declaring the election results. In both of those alternate instances, the recount must happen within 15 days of the clerk receiving the court order. And the recounts occur in the same manner in which the election occurred. So if they used, a voting tabulator, it will be recounted using a tabulator. If it was a hand count, they'll do a hand count. The only way that can be changed is if the justice makes a different order. That can happen. We have seen circumstances like that. Eligibility to run for office. A resident, non-resident owner, tenant, or spouse of a non-resident owner or tenant may be eligible to run. That's Greek, isn't it? Basically, there are a number of qualifications, and I would recommend that you look through the guide. It goes through it very specifically. Must be a Canadian citizen, must be 18 years of age or older, not legally prohibited from voting, not disqualified by any legislation, and must remain qualified, if elected, throughout the term of office. So if you move from Burlington to Whitby, I would welcome you, but you would no longer be able to hold your office in Burlington. Okay? You must maintain these. Does anybody care if a municipal councillor is running in provincial election? No? Okay, we'll keep going. Those who are not eligible to run for office. Any person who's not eligible to vote in the municipality. An employee of a municipality, unless they have taken an unpaid leave of absence before nomination. So if I'm an employee of Burlington and I want to run in Burlington, I have to take an unpaid leave of absence from my job. Okay? If I work for Burlington and for some reason I want to run somewhere else or the other way around, then I do not have to take that unpaid leave of absence unless I am a school board, running for school board. School boards are a little unique in that an employee of any school board must take an unpaid leave of absence in order to run in the school board for a school board trustee position. A little bit different, not sure why, but it is. Any judge of a court, member of the Ontario Legislature, Senate, House of Commons, or a person who was previously, who was a candidate in the previous election and did not file their campaign finances. Remember I talked about penalties? Remember I talked about how important those financial filings were? If you do not submit, automatically, not a judge, automatically, you are no longer qualified you cannot run in the next municipal election. Okay? There are a lot of folks who, for various sundry reasons, chose not to file their financial papers, excuse me, and then ended up in a position where they decided they do want to run. They went to the courts and they did not. Quite often, I would say in most cases, the courts did not rule in their favor. Eligibility to run for school board trustee. A resident within the jurisdiction of that board, eligible to vote for the school board election, and on the day the candidate files nominations, he or she must be a Canadian citizen, 18 years of age or older, and meet any other qualifications. So, for example, if you are running for French language rights positions, you must already be assigning your contributions or your contributions to that school board. So in order to be eligible to run in the Roman Catholic School Board, you need to be designating your education taxes towards the Roman Catholic School Board. Not eligible to run for school board trustee, it's the same as the municipal, except a clerk, deputy treasurer of a municipality cannot, within a jurisdiction, cannot run for trustee. Also, a person not eligible to vote in the municipality cannot run, and an employee of the school board unless they take an unpaid leave of absence, and we talked about that. Next slide, candidates' duties. And now we're getting into the real nitty-gritty here. This is where I'm kind of probably repeat myself a little bit from earlier slides, but also throughout the slides. And more than anything, it's to stress the importance of something, or there's a little bit of a complication in the circumstances, and I just want you to make sure you understand them. So one of the things, if you've become nominated, the first thing that you want to do, besides opening a bank account, it's the first thing you should do after you have filed nomination papers. Can I unabashedly ask who has their bank account? Wonderful. If you don't and you are nominated, you are a candidate, you need to put on your to-do list first thing tomorrow morning, opening a bank account. It is a legislated requirement. Whether you choose to raise any funds or not, it is a legislated requirement. Okay? So even if you're running a $0 campaign, you still had to pay a nomination fee, and potentially you may get that nomination fee back. All right? You still have to account for that and file financials. You're required to keep accurate records. Again, we talked about a bank account, and again, the bank accounts, banks are quite often very confused. Well, we're in a very confusing situation right now because of the provincial election. The requirements on the provincial and the federal candidates related to bank accounts are different than those for municipal. If you run into problems with your bank, just contact the municipal clerk, the municipal office, and ask, for them to refer you to the section of the Act that just it gives a little bit more detail on opening a bank account. However, each bank can have their own procedures as to what they require you to have. There are some banks who will require you to have a business account. I know there are some banks who will allow you to have a not-for-profit bank account. Again, those are their rules, not ours. Okay? All contributions of money must be deposited into your campaign account, and every expense you pay must flow through your bank account. As a candidate, it's important for you to be aware of these. It is you that are required to sign and submit your Form 4, your financial filings. It is you who will potentially or who could possibly be called for a compliance audit. It is you who will have to defend the actions you took. And it is you that will pay the penalties. There's no such thing as a CFO or a campaign manager. There is only you and a bunch of people who are helping you. All right? That's very important, very different than federal and provincial elections. You're not required to have a CFO. You're not required to have that little thing on the sign saying, I approve this. That's different level. Again, suggest that you familiarize yourself with the sections 66 to 82, which are the specific financial pieces in the Municipal Elections Act. There's a really good section in the guide on that. And again, open your bank account. And do not make it do not mix and mingle your campaign with your personal finances for two reasons. One, if you've got a really healthy savings account and you're using that as your campaign account, do you know what happens at the end with all that surplus money that you had saved for your retirement that's sitting in that account? It goes to the municipality. Okay? The other thing is, once you start commingling your personal and your account items, if you are required to go through a compliance audit process, your personal items are dragged in for the audit too. Okay? So keep them separate. Again, candidates' duties, slide 22. All payments of expenses, except for your nomination filing fee, because remember, you didn't have your bank account then, must be made through your campaign account. Contributions of goods and services must be valued. And receipts must be issued for every contribution, and a receipt has to be obtained for every expense. That includes in-kind donations. And in-kind donations must be valued at market value. Okay? And when I say market value, it means what everybody else in the room would have an opportunity to buy or pay for that same item. They would have the opportunity to pay the same price in your region. So, for example, in Sault Ste. Marie, somebody may pay a heck of a lot more for watermelon than you do here, just because of shipping costs. That's their market value. You have a different market value, but it is your jurisdiction's market value. I'm going to talk a little bit here about electronic payment methods. This comes up. Our municipal act, hasn't necessarily kept up with the banking industry. It does not address electronic payments. It still talks in terms of money orders, and checks. So what we say is the act is not permissive. It does not permit, but it does not prohibit electronic payments. And this really came up big in the last election in 2010. Visa, MasterCard, debit, PayPal. I can't tell you can do that. Again, the Act neither permits or prohibits. However, we do know that a lot of candidates in the last election and in this election are choosing to use those electronic methods. My suggestion to you, and practices that I've seen that are recommended by public accountants, certified public accountants, is that you keep your records and track those electronic payments as well as you do cash coming in and out of your account. So if you need, to make notes to file, somebody was telling me that sometimes when you buy a domain name, you don't necessarily always get a receipt. Well, just write yourself a note saying, on this date, I was on the computer on this website doing this, I used my Visa card, da-da-da-da-da. When your Visa statement comes in, you staple it to the note to file where, you highlight the charge that went on your Visa card. Just leave very big tracks so that you can see where the money came from, where it went, and how it flowed through those particular accounts. That's sort of the only advice I can give you on that. Candidates' duties. You have to receipt every contribution. The only exception is a pass the hat, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. You need to value every contribution. You need to, whether that contribution is in the form of money, goods, or services. You need to know the contributor's name and address, and when you're giving out receipts, they're over a certain amount of money, there's more detail that you'll need. Every expense, including receipts, you want every receipts for everything, every expense that you have. So, for example, if you keep a petty cash, you make sure that you have a ledger and the receipts that you're getting in matches up with that ledger, and you can just write yourself a check to replenish the petty cash. Just keep big tracks so that there's no question where the money came and went. Check registries, canceled checks, all of those types of things. All of those are records that you should be keeping, and not in a shoebox, not in a grocery bag. Try to keep them in some really nicely organized fashion. And again, I'm going to tell you to have a look at the Form 4 and see how you need to account for that money in the end, and that may dictate how you keep your records now. All of those records that you have related to your campaign, you are required to keep until December 2018, when the new council or new set of trustees takes over. Again, just keep them in a safe place, have them organized so that if you do need to pull them out, that you've got them. This is regardless of whether you're successful or not. Even if you're unsuccessful, you are required to keep those records.
One thing I would suggest is for candidates, because what I noticed last time is a lot of candidates looked at the form they have to fill out after the election. So look at Form 4, what you're going to be required to fill out, so you don't get any surprises after the election and go, oh, I didn't know they were going to ask me for that. And so you know what is expected, and you can prepare your documentation and record keeping in accordance with what you're going to have to fill out.
Perfect. And again, that pass the hat that I mentioned, that I'm going to talk about a little later, is a really good example of why you need to look at your Form 4, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Campaign spending limits. Your campaign spending limit is a number that is given to you by the clerk twice. You will have expenses that are subject to that spending limit, and you will have expenses that are not subject to that spending limit. So I want to make that clear when I talk about that. So oftentimes, sometimes I get a phone call in the office and somebody says, I was just looking at so-and-so's campaign and they were only able to spend, their spending limit was $27,000, but yet I looked at their financial forms and they had $56,000 on there. Well, remember, there's two things. There's the items that count against the spending limit and there's the items that don't. And we'll, again, get into more detail. And so your numbers are given to you when you file your nomination papers, and those are based on the final 2010 voting list. You will get another set of numbers, that campaign spending limit, after the close of nominations, September 22nd. And that is based on the voters list, or the preliminary list of electors that get turned over to the municipality that gets turned into a voters list closer to that date. Sometimes there's ward boundary reviews from one election to another. There are other things that happen. There's ward boundary realignments, all of that sort of stuff that can impact the electors, the number of electors that are in a particular ward from one election to another. We give you the benefit of the doubt. Whichever campaign spending limit you get is the higher one. That is the one you use for your particular election, for this election. Okay? Contribution limits. This is another really important concept for you guys to understand, because not only do you need to understand it, the people who give you money need to understand it, because you can be penalized and they can be penalized if something happens. So the limit on contributions donated in money, goods, or services in kind from any individual corporation or trade union is $750 to any one candidate, to a maximum of $5,000 within the jurisdiction. So let's just say I had lots of money, and I could give out $750, up to $5,000 for people running in the Burlington election, municipal election. I could give out $750 and up to $5,000 for people running in Burlington School Board, French Catholic separate school board, and I could do the same in the Oakville election, municipal election, and the Oakville, each particular jurisdiction is a maximum of $5,000. Okay. That applies whether somebody gives you the money in dribs and drabs or as one lump sum. Okay? You need to track this. You need to know, and as soon as you're aware that that person may be over their $750, you could be in trouble and they could be in trouble, and you need to take action to rectify that. So say, for example, you kind of went, oh my gosh, Bob gave me $1,000. What do I do? Immediately write a $250 check back to Bob, write him a letter explaining him why you're giving it back to him, write a note to file, make big tracts so that you're ever asked to justify that. That, as soon as you know, deal with it. Just want to talk about corporations. A sole proprietorship, okay, is not permitted to contribute to your campaign. The individual that owns can, but the sole proprietorship, the business, cannot. Limited liability partnerships are not allowed. Often CAs or legal folks are limited liability partnerships. They cannot contribute as a corporation. And you want to know, you have to be aware that if there is an umbrella corporation, so there's some simple terms, there's a mama corporation, and then there are a bunch of baby corporations that fall underneath that umbrella, that whole can only contribute $750. So if they are associated, they can only contribute $750. If they are, 10 very distinct, separately filing income tax revenue thingy doodles, that's different. $750, $750, but you have the responsibility of knowing that. Some of the things to look for: corporate checks, the same address on corporate checks, the same signators, sort of things you might want to clue into. And one of the other things that I noted in a couple of campaigns is on the bottom of the receipt, people put a reminder. You are only able to contribute blah, 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 and they put some of those details on there. Again, it's just something that may make somebody say, oh, wait a minute. And again, if you take a donation from somebody asked me this last night, somebody contributes over $5,000, and I'm the one that got the last check. Who has to deal with it? Well, I'm going to say the person who realizes it first should take action to try to rectify that. If that's you, then it's a matter of calling the person who gave you that money and saying, look, we got a bit of a problem here. How do you want to handle this? And you may, quite frankly, have to hand that check back or a portion of that check back because you don't want to put yourself in that risk. Okay? Contribution limits. There is no limit on what a candidate or their spouse can contribute to their campaign. Okay, that's really important to note. And these contributions have to be reported. Campaign contributions continued. Contributions can be money, goods, and services. Cash can be donated up to only $25. After $25, they must give it to you, check, money order, or a method that clearly shows where the funds originated. So if you see the writing of that when we talk about electronic payment, the whole bottom line there clearly shows where the funds originated. Okay, so you may need to get some extra documentation. Ticket prices to a fundraiser are a contribution. When you need to write you need to receipt contributions. Only one exception to that. There, you're required to have name, address, amount they gave you, the type of payment they gave you, and the date they gave it to you. There are no anonymous contributions allowed, except for a pass the hat at a fundraiser. So, definition of a fundraiser. A fundraising function is an event or an activity held by or on behalf of a candidate for the primary purpose of raising money for that candidate's campaign. The price of admission for a fundraiser is a campaign contribution, and a receipt must be issued for the full amount. If you are having a bona fide fundraiser, the intent is purely fundraising, you can do what's called a pass the hat. And that, it's as simple as it sounds. You know, you've got somebody who's walking around going, donate, 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 donate. People can only put in a maximum of $10. If you have 10 people, here's where the math comes in, and I always get tired and mess this one up. I'm not very good at math this late at night. If you have 10 people at your event, they all give you $10, you should have $100 in the hat, right? Thank you. If you have $120 in that hat, what do you have to do? You can give it to the municipality, because that is an anonymous donation that is in contravention of the Act. So the people who are running those pass the hats for you, again, this is where you as the candidate needs to train your people. You're responsible. It would be you that be writing the check back to the municipality, not the guy who walked around with a hat. They have to watch. If somebody drops in a 50, dig it out, hand it back, and say, you know, here, let me give you change, and you can only put in $10. The reason I tell you that you have to be careful is because in the Form 4, there is a section that deals specifically with fundraisers, and you need to put an attendance number. So if you put 10 people attend, or 100 people attend, 10 people attended, and in your pass the hat you had $200, people are going to see that, flags go off, and you've got a problem, okay?
Maybe to help Diana. Yeah. So we require you to submit your forms, but we don't police it. That's why there is the Election Compliance Audit Committee. So all the forms are posted online, and someone can complain and ask for a compliance audit. The clerk does not go through and make sure you've done everything. You have to sign an oath. If you raise over so much, yeah. Diane will probably explain that. You have to have it audited and those sorts of things. But yeah, that's not my job.
No. And again, when we say it's your responsibility, it's unfortunate that you even have to ask that. But you do. You're going to find out in this presentation, those financial submissions that you hand in get scanned and posted onto a website for everybody to scrutinize. And I think it's very important because, they do. That's how campaign compliance audits come about. How do you keep a candidate honest? It's unfortunate that you even have to ask. Yep. Yeah.
Okay, look, you brought up the possibility that somebody threw in a $50 bill.
Yep.
However, they could make their own change and still be limited to $10 contribution.
So
And nobody could prove either way.
they threw in a $50 bill, I would recommend that the people pull it out, say, would you like change? You're only able to donate. They hand them back 5 tens and put the 50 back in there, and then the person can drop in 10. Yep, that's absolutely possible. Well, I'm not saying that's the trigger, but if somebody sees an individual drop in 50 and walk away, that's a $50 contribution, not a $10 contribution. So that's what I'm, yeah. Anyways, who can contribute? Individuals who normally reside in Ontario. Normally reside mean, a really good guideline is what do they put on their income tax return? We ran into problems in Niagara and in Muskoka where they were getting a lot of U.S. citizens donating to campaigns. Can't. Normally reside in Ontario. Corporations that carry on business in Ontario, unions that hold bargaining rights for employees in Ontario, and a candidate or his or her spouse. And again, I know if you're familiar with some of the compliance audits that happened in Niagara, they were related to some U.S. cottager contributions. Who may not contribute? Federal political parties, constituency associations, you can read them. The one I want to talk about here is the municipality or the school board. And again, this is where that policy related to municipal use of resources comes in. There are elected trustees and elected council members or mayors who still have a job to do. And they have a job until the next council takes over. Remember we talked about all of those roles and responsibilities? They're still obligated to maintaining the fiduciary responsibility of that municipality and its operations and its direction and strategic plans. And there are functions that they will have to continue to do. However, there is a recognition that by being an incumbent, sometimes there is an advantage. So municipalities put in place policies and procedures that limit or restrict access to municipal resources, phone, mailings, all of that kind of thing. But you do have to remember those folks still do have a responsibility. Another thing that I want to talk about, you guys want any comment on that? No? You're good? Yep.
Yeah, the policy is in everybody's package, and it actually also, it doesn't only apply to incumbents, it applies to candidates as well. So our policy is broader because you can't use any city facilities for your election campaign and all of that sort of thing. Pictures, photos can't be taken in City Hall to be used on your campaign. Nothing to do with the City of Burlington can be used in your campaign. So.
And that's the same for Oakville.
Perfect. Okay. Volunteers. I often get the question, how do we deal with volunteers? You need to, the value of the services provided by volunteers is generally not considered a contribution. Where that changes is if a professional volunteer provides a service for which they normally are paid or gain income. So if I'm a web designer and I volunteer to do your web design, you need to value that as a contribution. So for example, if, I know web designing can get expensive. So let's just say the market value of that contribution is $1,000. That person has gone over their limit. So what can happen in that situation is they can make a contribution of $750 and you write them a receipt, and then you pay $250, pay a $250 invoice for the remainder of that. You have to account for all of the money. Get it at the end. Okay? And again, it's up to you to decide who is a professional volunteer and who is not. People are going to be looking at your campaign materials, they're going to be looking at the services you've had provided, and they're going to look at your finances. Next slide, borrowing. One of the ways in which a candidate can sort of open their campaign funds is by taking out a loan. They can use this to fund part of their campaign. What you have to remember is that the loan is a loan that is taken through a lending institution, a recognized lending institution in Ontario, and the loans are guaranteed by either the candidate or their spouse. One of the advantages with using a loan situation is any interest or expenses associated with that particular loan can be claimed as campaign expenses. One of the things that can't happen is if you take out a loan and partway through your fundraising you see you're doing well, you cannot remove those funds. A candidate cannot remove funds until the end, until everything is closed off, and we're going to talk about that too. Campaign expenses. Again, any expenses incurred for goods and services in relation to the election. Replacement value of any goods and services held in inventory. So again, the whole concept of leveling the playing field. If an incumbent has signs that they've been storing for 4 years, they can bring those signs out of hiding, but they must value those signs at current market value as if they paid for them this year. Okay. You also have the equivalent value of any contributions of goods and services are also a campaign expense. And your nomination filing fee is a campaign expense. Things that are exempt, remember I talked about against the limit and not against the limit? I talked about the scenario where somebody had a limit of 20 some odd and they had 56 on their financial form. Here are some of the things that do not go against the spending limit. Holding a fundraising event or activity, parties or other expressions of appreciation after the close of voting. One of the things to keep in mind is make sure those expressions of appreciation happen very quickly after your campaign. Not close to Christmas or not close to when you know you've got a surplus and you want to get rid of some money. The reason I say that is because there were examples of compliance audits that were carried out, brought on by circumstances very similar to what I just described. Expenses related to a recount or any expenses after voting day. Campaign continued. Any expenses that are incurred by a candidate with a disability that are directly associated to the disability. So if a candidate needed an interpreter, the expenses related to paying for an interpreter to level the playing field for that particular candidate are not subject to the spending limit. Audit and accounting fees, expenses related to a compliance audit, or any court actions over controverted elections. Financial reporting. And again, these things, some of this I will be repeating. Your financial statement, your Form 4, for everyone must be filed on March 27th by 2 p.m., regardless of whether you extended your campaign or not. If a candidate feels that he is not going to meet that March 27th deadline, 2015, he or she may go to the courts to request an extension. If they request the extension, they must notify the clerk of this action. So, for example, if leading up to March 27th, you have until March 26th to get into a court and to get a judge to agree to allow you to extend your campaign, and on March 27th you have to go in and prove that to the clerk, that you've got that extension. Failure to file by the deadline results in an automatic loss of your seat, if elected, and an ineligibility, oh my gosh, starting to lose my mouth, an eligibility to hold office in which the Municipal Elections Act applies to until after the next election. Okay, so that would be 22, math again. All contributions need to be reported. The names of contributors of more than $100, so $100.01, must be reported on the financial statement, and it becomes a public document. So folks who do donate over $100 need to know that their name and all of that information and the fact that they donated to your campaign is going to be made public. Okay. Financial statements must include an auditor's report if expenses or contributions exceed $10,000. And if you think as soon as you think you're going to have a campaign in that league, I would start finding an auditor, because they're few and far between. They need to be auditors licensed under the Public Accounting Act. Not a lot of them have a specialty in Municipal Elections Act financing, so you might have to search. We found some folks who were really caught short as they came up to filing their financials. And I talked about the financial statements being reported. This next slide on financial reporting, again, is a repeat, so I'm not going to repeat that. Surplus or deficit, this is a really important one. If there is a surplus at the end of a campaign, the surplus must be paid to the clerk. And it's not the clerk's Florida fund. It's the clerk of the municipality. It goes into a trust account and is held there. It's held there as a surplus until the possibility of a recount, an application for a converted election, or a compliance audit has passed. And if none of those things occur, that surplus becomes part of the municipal general revenues. Okay? Leading up to when you're filing your financials, if you have a surplus, the first thing that you can look at is prior to paying over any surplus funds to the clerk, the candidate is entitled to refund any contributions they or their spouse made to their campaign. So if you have a surplus of $200 and you put $400 in, you can take up to the $200 surplus. If you put in $400, if you put in, say, $1,000, here we go, math again, sorry. I should make these examples, put these examples in my notes, because it's really hard to do on the fly. Anyways, you kind of get the concept. You can only take out what you've contributed to a maximum of what is in the surplus. So if you contributed $1,000, there's $200 there, you can only take $200. If you contributed $200 and there's $1,000 there, you can only take the $200. Right? Yes, thank you. Anyways, and any surplus after that has to be turned over to the clerk. And again, it's not the clerk's money, it becomes part of the general revenues. I'm going to skip the next slide. It's just some suggested practices that you may want to think about. Move on to compliance audit. A compliance audit is an opportunity for an elector to ask, to have a look at your finances, and they kind of go, I think something's wrong here. It's an opportunity for them to request a compliance audit committee that has been put in place by the school board or by the municipality to do an audit of your campaign finances. The audit committee, and I understand that you use a joint audit committee. Yes. So Halton Region pools their resources and puts together one compliance audit committee. Somebody will submit an application for a compliance audit. That compliance audit committee will review it. And it's not as simple as just putting an application in. They do have to identify where they think the problems are with the finance. So they do have to, it's not just saying, I hate him, I'm going to get him. It's a matter of saying, I think that there was an over-expenditure here or an inappropriate expenditure here. Here's what I found. And you're sort of directing the Compliance Audit Committee. Compliance Audit Committee has the ability to say, yeah, I agree, we're going to request an audit, or no, I don't agree, or, I agree, but it is not egregious, and it's not worthy, that's not the right word. It's not, let's just say they have the choice. They can use their discretion. And we did see circumstances where the discretion was made not to go to a compliance audit. We also saw circumstances when, after the auditor was done and they identified contraventions, we did see discretion where the Compliance Audit Committee chose not to pursue charges. And again, it is the jurisdiction of the Compliance Audit Committee. Sometimes it's just inadvertent. Sometimes the person corrected the problem. They handed back a check, and maybe that was after the campaign finances were submitted. Somebody brought to their attention in Niagara. There were some compliance audits in Niagara where, some of those folks did hand the checks back to the people from the U.S., and when it got to an auditor's level and then back to the Compliance Audit Committee, they said, well, they realized it, they rectified it. We're not going to, pursue charges. There also are some cases where charges were pursued. I'm going to go to the penalties page. There is a slate of choices that a judge has available to them, and these are them. They're not easy, guys. They're not simple. There are some that are automatic. You can't. You lose your seat. You can't run in the next election under certain circumstances. And then there are these, and there are various and sundries. And I will tell you, there was an audit done in Durham Region where $46,000 in penalties, court costs, so on and so forth were awarded. It's not something to take lightly, so be careful. And the last thing I just want to talk about is, again, the resources that are available to you. Please take advantage of them, and I know I went over.
Oh,
Sorry.
that's okay. I thought what we'd do now is if you have questions of Diane just on sort of election financing, expense limits, that sort of thing, why don't we take care of those now while they're top of mind? And then we'll do a quick overview of sort of the voting process in Burlington and Oakville. So questions about election financing and reporting? Yeah. Yes.
All of these dates and procedures that you've given us, they apply to school boards,
Absolutely. Yes.
including the county school board?
Yes.
Yes.
All anyone running in the municipal election.
And the second one is, you talked about a volunteer having expertise in finance. You would have to give them a fight. What if the person, my volunteer that I prefer Scrutineer had, is a Scrutineer in another election?
That's a different thing.
Yeah.
No.
And just on the compliance audit, the school board sets up their own compliance audit committees. They appoint their own. Each of the school boards, the Catholic school board, the public school board, they have to set and appoint their own school board or compliance audit committees. In the region of Halton, the 4 municipalities and the region have joined together this time and are appointing a joint audit committee, compliance audit committee, so that we will pick 5 people throughout the whole region to sit on that committee and do that work for the 5 municipalities, the 4 town of Milton, town of Halton Hills, town of Oakville, city of Burlington, and region of Halton. So.
Yeah, so really?
Well, it's being webcast, so some
okay.
people watching may be interested in the question. That's all. I can hear you, but
Okay, so I have already opened a bank account, and when I talked to the bank, yeah, and I asked them, can you give me a loan? And they kind of went, no, like, why? So they weren't familiar with it. So I took money out of my credit line to open the bank account. So that would be my personal contribution to my campaign? Yeah, okay, just wanted to be clear on that. Okay, thank you.
If I'm in line or not. Just back to the proxy voting. I think one of a candidate's jobs is when they're campaigning to educate voters, in particular when there's changes in their voting stations, et cetera. Is it possible to take those proxy forms with you, in the odd situation that you'd want to hand, or is you just direct them to somewhere where they can access those proxy forms?
I would prefer that they just be directed to me, to the clerk's office. In Burlington, and we'll get into that a little bit. We have internet voting, so that's an option I prefer people to use if that works better.
And if you want to make it, if you want to make it really convenient, just you know how you can do those like Staples business card formats. Just do a business card with the contact information.
Yep.
Just say for proxy voting for
Yep.
and then hand it to them. Great. Yeah.
And we will have all the information on the website
Yes.
of both municipalities. We make sure we put as much after this session. We'll be putting all the PowerPoints and as much information up as we can to make it easier for everybody to access.
Yeah, hi, thanks. I really like to just pursue the electronic transfer of funds, both contributions and payments, because that's sort of the way things work these days. And you're saying that you have a limit of $25 as a contribution?
No.
Anyway,
Cash.
okay, but if it comes in PayPal, that's not cash. Is that what you're saying? So okay, so as long as it fits the other limits, that's just fine.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to fit the parameters.
Because if you have PayPal, then you have names and addresses, so you've got all of that working out. And payment the same way?
For example, I've heard candidates who've paid for a particular expense using their personal visa. And so what they've done is when their personal visa came in, they highlighted the item. You know, they wrote a little story on their visa bill saying what it's all about. They wrote a check from their campaign account just for that item, paid it onto their visa. Again, see where I'm saying big tracks.
I hear you.
So people
Okay.
can follow the money very carefully.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so we're going to move on and do a quick overview of some specific situations in Burlington and Oakville, some things specific to voting day here. And so we're going to kind of pop up, Oakville and I think it's mostly Kim, and Vicki as well is going to pop up and give us a hand. I think, yes, if Amir could get our PowerPoint up. Some of the things we're going to talk about is accessibility, just to let you know the accessibility measures put in place for this election, both in Burlington and Oakville. The voting process, election signs, and then we'll do any more questions and answers as well. So we won't keep you too much longer. The Act requires, and we as a municipality want to ensure that all voting locations and the election is accessible to anyone and everyone. So we take extra efforts to ensure that happens. In our municipalities, there's site visits with the accessibility coordinator to all of the voting locations. And there's also, we have an accessibility coordinator. There's also a volunteer committee. So between the two groups, they will help us ensure that the voting locations are accessible and give us some recommendations in certain situations where maybe there isn't automatic doors or something to help with that accessibility by hiring staff to assist. We encourage advanced voting. All of our advanced vote locations will have accessibility voting methods there. So there's like a sip and puff machine and that sort of thing. Those will not be available on election day except at City Hall, but they are available at all the advanced voting dates. In addition, there's special voting locations on Election Day as required by the Act for long-term care facilities and retirement homes. There's very specific definition of where those places are, but there are special locations and different hours for those voting locations as well. We're allowed to set our own hours so that we can just have, say, 2 hours at a long-term care, and we let them know that we'll be there for those 2 hours, and then we move on to another location. Magnification will also be available at all the voting locations. And there is proxy voting, as we talked about, as another accessibility option. In the city of Burlington, just to give you an overview of what's going to happen for the voting period, there's 3 advanced voting locations on 2 separate days. So the advanced voting locations will be Haber Recreation Facility, which is the new facility on Highway 5 and Tim Dobby Drive, the Burlington Seniors Center, which is downtown, and Mapleview Mall. So there are 2 days. One is a weekday and one is a Saturday that we will have advanced voting. There are also 19 days to register to vote via the internet in Burlington, and 18 days to vote via internet. So our internet voting requires, and this can be confusing for people, it requires you to actually register to vote, and then once you get a PIN, then you can use that PIN to vote. But you have to so it's a 2-step process, and that's for the security of the vote. So we give people 19 days to register and then 18 days to vote. We also will have 39 regular voting locations on Election Day and 16 special voting locations. Specials are like those long-term care facilities and retirement homes. And elector identification is required, but everybody will receive a voter identification notice. We really ask that people bring their voter identification notice that they receive in the mail to the voting location. That's the quickest, fastest way to get through that voting location. So. Also, just to highlight on the advanced voting days, those are citywide voting, so you can vote at any of those. You don't have to be in that ward or whatever. You can pick any one of those at citywide. On election day, you have to be at your specific polling location, polling subdivision. I'm just going to have Vicki come up and go over what's going on in Oakville.
So in Oakville, all of our voting locations will be finalized and made available to all of the candidates by September. And we'll be providing all of our candidates with maps that will show where all of our locations are, both for advanced and voting day, which pertains to their office. We're going to have 5 advanced voting, well, actually 6 advanced voting locations, but one location will only operate on one day. The rest will be on every other of the 5 days. And 36 voting locations on voting day, one of which will be accessible. All of our advanced voting locations will be accessible. Every voting location will be using vote tabulators, and we will be using the paper ballots, which you'll see a sample of shortly. We'll also be giving you a demonstration on the vote tabulator so you can see how they really work if you haven't been able to experience that yet. In Oakville, there will also be 14 reduced hour voting locations where we go out and visit the retirement homes, long-term care facilities, and other institutions where the residents are given the opportunity to vote so they don't have to leave the facility. We will be requiring voter identification to be provided by all of the voters. If a voter doesn't have identification and they're not on the voters list, they'll be required to complete a declaration of qualification form. And we're also asking that the voters bring their voter information card with them. It would really help us to assist in the voting process and make it go along a lot quicker.
So on voting day, at each of the voting locations, there are a number of staff assigned to each location. The person in charge at each of those locations is a deputy returning officer. In Burlington's case, those are city staff. We go down to skeleton staff on election day and try and get all of our staff in all the departments to help out. So the deputy returning officer is a city staff person, and they're in charge of that voting place. Also, there is a revision clerk, so people wanting to get added to the list or change their address, change their information, school support, that can be done at that day through the revision clerk. The election assistant is the person who is actually in charge of the tabulator, and they feed the ballot through for the elector. There's a poll clerk that strikes off the voters list and gives the person the ballot. And then there's also a greeter in some locations. Not all locations have a greeter. Some, especially to assist with some of those accessibility requirements, have a greeter in large locations. There are 5 different types of ballots. There's one for each school board, the French school boards, and councils. So each of the school boards have a different color, and to identify each of the different types of ballots. We use an optical scan vote tabulator, both in Oakville and Burlington, and we have a sample here, and Kim's going to demonstrate it for us in a little bit. And if you are a registered candidate in Burlington and probably in Oakville as well, you will have received information on their vote counting procedures, on the alternative, on the equipment, that was sent out probably just last week by email. It's also available online, and it is in the candidate information packages for future people who come in and register. So both what you keep hearing from us is website, because there is a lot of paper in an election, and we really prefer people to just go to the website and look that up. One, because you lose the paper and you can't remember where you put it and all that sort of thing. So we make sure everything goes on there and you know where to find it, and the people working with you know where to find it as well. So I don't know, do you guys have anything to add on your voting process?
It's pretty much the Same
Same,
terms,
yep.
different titles, but same concept.
Advanced voting, we pretty much went into a lot of that. There's vote tabulator machines and accessible functions on voting day and advanced voting, as we said. Continuous voting at each location. At the end of each advanced voting day, the ballots are sealed in the ballot box, and supplies are secured, and it is brought back to City Hall and put in a secure room. And advanced voting results are tabulated at City or Town Hall, in Oakville's case, on voting day at 8 p.m. Okay. And I'll have Kim come up and talk about election technology.
I get the easy part. As we've talked, we use tabulators for our elections in advance and on voting day. And Burlington and Oakville have both used electronic tabulators now since the late 90s with great success. We do a logic and accuracy testing for diagnostic to ensure that everything goes smoothly on voting day and that the machines work exactly as they should. We do at the advanced voting locations set them up with the accessible components as well, so it's more material and more things for our staff to learn. Makes it more challenging and but more interesting at the same time. The voting day, we do have one accessible location each, as Angela was saying, and all of that information will be available. Burlington is hosting internet voting for advanced voting. This is their second time doing that, and I hear it went very well, so they're doing it again. Oakville is not. We have a sample ballot. I'm sure that's really not clear. So there is one over here you can look at when we show you how the machine works shortly. As far as voting locations, this is just a layout of what the voting location will look like. Not every location is exactly the same, as I'm sure you're aware, but we try and set them up so the flow goes through so that they come in and they're greeted. They get the ID and their voter information card, go to somebody that's going to issue them a ballot, get their name off the list, and then they go and they mark their ballot in the secrecy folder, and then they go around to the tabulator, have the ballot fed in, and they're on their way. We do ask that there are no cameras, laptops, computers, pagers, cell phones, or electronic communication devices brought into a voting location or on while in the voting location. It's very distracting, and it does potentially make things harder for us with our own technology. So that's just something we prohibit. Then we go on to election signs.
So election signs, we've already seen lots of them out there, and I'm sure we're going to have a whole year of election signs. It looks like we'll have a bunch till June 12th, and then we might get a little bit of a break, and then starting in September we'll see a bunch more. Each municipality does have their own sign bylaw, and Oakville can talk to theirs specifically. In Burlington, September 12th is the earliest that election signs can go up for the municipal election, and they need to be removed by 8 p.m. on October 29th. Signs are allowed on private property only. They are not permitted on any public property or any portion of the road allowance on any road in Burlington, even regional roads. They will be removed, and in order to get them back, it is a fee per sign. So it's quite expensive to get them back. Most people don't want it's more expensive than the sign's worth. And the reason for that, we have had recently some complaints and a bit of a controversy about that in Burlington with the provincial election, is we pay staff to do that. And that costs a lot of money to have all these staff go out, because we get complaints from various candidates about signs here and signs there, and have all of those staff patrolling and removing signs and bringing them back. Then we have to dispose of them. So it is an expensive process to deal with the signage. So as long as you have permission from the property owner on private property, you are welcome to put your signs up on private property. There is a sign bylaw, and it is on both of the Oakville and Burlington websites.
It will be.
Oh, it will be?
Well, it is if you know the number.
Right, okay. So sign retrieval, if you do want to retrieve your signs, you have to give us 24 hours notice. We don't charge for pickup of vandalized signs, not that you would want them back anyway. And the retrieval for us is at Roads and Parks Maintenance between 8:30 and 4:30, Monday to Friday. In Oakville, they'll charge you $50 a sign, and in Burlington, we charge you $80. And there's no pickup on Election Day. So, I don't know, do you have anything more to add on the, you have a bit of a map?
I do. I just have one more. In Oakville's candidate guide on our website, there is, in section 4, appendix 4, there is a lot of information on election signs for those that need it. I know there's not many people here that need it, but there are a couple. So we changed our sign bylaws so that election signs are only permitted on major arterial roads. It used to be all roads, so it's less than before. Bob DeHoog is our sign expert, and he's the person that you contact if you have any questions on the fine details. Sign locations and wooden supports and your metal stakes, there are criteria around those as far as 2x2 for the wood and 1/4 inch maximum for the metal stakes. And then we do charge a $200 deposit. And we have had one issue already with the provincial signs in the wind blowing and hitting somebody's car. So there is also a liability issue, and that applies to everybody. Potential liability issue. If your signs are not secure, they are yours, and you could be liable for that. With regards to the map that we have here, Bob can explain that if you're really interested, with the setbacks and where exactly you can put signs in relation to the sidewalk, the road, and on the public road allowance. And I think that's it for me. It will be. All of the sign information will be under this. There is some information already, and we're adding, as we go, we're adding as much information as we can so you have access to the whole.
So just to finalize, I think when everybody's done, when we're done and done questions, Kim's going to demonstrate the tabulator so that people can come up closer. But just final information about what to expect post-election. So October 27th has come, and now what, right? There's still lots of work to do. When I first became clerk, I thought, yes, October 28th is good. And then I found out there's a whole bunch of work to do on October 28th and beyond. So all candidates will be asking you to return your voters list. We send post-election survey out to everybody too to find out what worked for you, what didn't work for you. You need to start working on your financial filing. We've just done that, provide you lots of information on that, and any other follow-up required, and removing your election signs as well and disposing of them. If you're elected to council or the school board, there is a whole orientation process to be done, and so you'll quickly hear from me if you're a elected official in Burlington about information sessions and orientation that will begin in November. The inaugural, you're officially elected and on council as of December 1st, but we do run some orientation in November, so be prepared for that. You may also want to take a look at our current meeting calendar so that you can, because our meetings are established a year in advance, so that you are aware of what dates you'll be required to attend council and committee meetings and all of the requirements for that, so that you're not caught off guard when all of a sudden, it's like, oh, I didn't know I had something going on Monday night and council is Monday night, so that you know what's going on. In Burlington, each of the councillors has an office, so that's part of what we cover with you in November, is we sort of familiarize you with your office and your the technology that'll be available to you and the staff available and all of that kind of stuff, and what will be happening on the inaugural day, which is December 1st. In Burlington, the inaugural council meeting will be held at the Burlington Performing Arts Centre this year. So, do you have anything else to add?
Most of that information also applies to Oakville, with the exception that we don't have offices for all of our councillors. We have an office that councillors can use, and they also get home office set up for use for their council duties. So, but everything else, I think we pretty much do the same as far as the inaugural and the meetings and the schedules a year ahead. So that's good.
Just for the folks running in Burlington, we are really encouraging people to use internet voting. Last time was our first time. We got about 5% of the voters using it. I'm hoping to increase that. I think it was the first time, and people were still becoming comfortable with it. And 4 years have gone by, and we do even more on the internet. So hopefully there'll be an increase in comfort with that. One, just because it allows you that flexibility. There's no waiting in line. You know, you can do it any time during that period. You don't have to figure out what hours and what place you have to go to. So we will be doing a lot more promotion of that. It's too early for that, but you'll see in September a lot more promotion of that. And any questions about internet voting and security, I'm happy to answer one-on-one with anybody. We don't give out a lot of security information because that's the whole idea, but there is a substantial amount of security behind the scenes on that. And just if you are the supplier who also, the vendor who also supplies the tabulators, has done internet voting widespread in a lot of municipalities, and they also ran the Liberal leadership race through internet voting as well. So they have a lot of experience throughout the world, actually. So is there any questions about anything we've covered? Yes. Here she comes.
Thank you. How do you communicate after you've tabulated all the votes? How is that communicated?
Good question. I meant to cover that. So we used to have a thing at City Hall where people could come in, and what we found, and I know Oakville still does it, but we found candidates were really not interested in coming to City Hall. They preferred to be with the people that, the volunteers that they worked with. So it is all on our website, and you can follow our website. The media taps in. I'm not a technology person, so the media taps in from some special portal or something, and they get the results fed to them, and it also goes up on the website at the exact same time, so it's a constant updating as results start to come in. Each of the DROs at the polling locations, they take their tabulator, come back to City Hall. They've already run their results, and they hand it all to a designated person here who then inputs it, and it gets fed up. So it happens fairly quickly. We usually have most results in by 9:30 for sure.
So if you have scrutineers at the various stations, the DRO will be sharing that information with the scrutineers. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
When they run the tape at the location, you can the scrutineers can see.
And one more question. In the last election, it was very difficult for the scrutineers to get to the list, to look at the list, because of the amount of lineups that there were, and it almost kind of, it was a useless exercise at one point.
Well, I think that there's a couple of things in that. We did have some bad lineups last time. We have added polling locations this time to decrease lineups at some of the ones where we had a problem. Also, the reason we're going for trying to encourage more internet voting as well. When it comes to the scrutineers, I understand they want to look at the voters list and to see who's voted. But there does come a point sometimes, especially between the hours of 5 and 7, where it's busy and our priority is the voter. Yeah, but they should be able to, as soon as there's a break, be able to talk to the poll clerk about taking a look and going through it. But sometimes, especially in Burlington, we're a commuter town, and lots of people want to come and vote between 5 and 7 as they get home from work or whatever. So that is one of the things that happens here. I don't know if Oakville has a better way to deal with that.
Well, typically, scrutineers don't have to see the list. The results, as we were talking earlier, they get posted for the scrutineers to see the results that are coming out of the tabulator. They can oversee people coming in and being issued their ballot. When we do our advanced voting in the past, we've always used computers, so there isn't a paper list for the scrutineers to look at.
That's
and
true.
if we continue in this election, we're doing strike-off through electronic means instead of through a paper list, so there won't be a paper list for people to look at during the day.
But then what the practice is in a lot of elections you have an inside and outside scrutineer. And the inside scrutineer will look at the list, and then when you're trying to pull the vote for the people that you know are your supporters, if you don't know if they've come in to vote, that's the point of looking at the list.
But unfortunately, that's even with internet voting. You don't get to look at
with
the
internet
list.
voting, I understand, but then it's really changing, and we're struggling with it. In a lot of cases, we're struggling with that whole process, and, but I just know last election, it was very difficult.
I think it's going to get more difficult over time, to be honest, just because of the different methods of voting.
Yeah, and I noticed last election, to be honest, that a lot fewer candidates were even using scrutineers. I mean, when I first started doing elections years and years ago, there was a lot of scrutineers at every voting location, and I don't know if that's why, but a lot of them have stopped using scrutineers.
Be there just to make sure that everything is copacetic, everything's going well, it's kosher, not to race back and make phone calls, isn't that?
No. I've worked in many elections in Burlington, and we've used the scrutineer process for many, many years. And if you know who are your supporters, you want to make sure that they come in to vote, and it's called pulling the vote. And that's a standard election process that's used in whether it's municipal or provincial or federal. So I was just wondering, and now that you're saying that's going to be even more difficult, it's something to think about on both sides, I think.
Any other questions? Yeah.
The voting list, do you
Yes.
want it back in the condition in which it was given to us? Or can I mark it up?
Oh, you can do whatever you want to it. Yes, yes.
But we have to return it.
Yes, well, the disc, you send back the disc. Yes. And we do provide paper ones as well. We give you an option. When you signed up, you decided what you wanted. But yeah, you can give it to us if you've written on it, whatever.
Great.
Yeah.
So you want the digital as well as the paper copy back?
Well, you only get one.
If we've made a paper copy of it, do you want that? Hey, see? It's kind of futile to ask for the disc back, because we could have made,
In Oakville, we will have you take an oath that says, I
Right.
have destroyed, returned
Mhm.
all
Okay.
copies,
Yes.
electronic or paper.
Question about the audit, the compliance audit. What's
Yes.
the statute of limitations on that?
There are still compliance audits underway in the city of Toronto for the previous election.
How far back will you go?
They can happen anytime.
Until the next
There's
election.
got to be a all right, so until
Yes,
the next
until the next
election.
election.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I have a question about using the municipal resources. If I wanted to hold a meet the candidate meeting,
Yeah.
or greet or meet the candidate, the public library would not be a venue for that?
You just have to pay for it.
Oh,
What I mean is using it for free.
Okay.
So you can book a room wherever you can find a room, whether it be municipal or whatever.
Yeah.
You can't leave your campaign material around, they'll take that out, but if you
Yeah.
want to hold, just like councillors hold their open houses and that, and they pay for those rooms as well, just so you know, current members of council pay for those facilities.
So, sorry, I'm missing something there. So, Haber Recreation Center, as a
Yes.
candidate, you can rent and pay for that room?
Yes.
Okay, I was told otherwise. By
Maybe
Parks and
Haber
Rec.
has some different policies on that.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, we can talk later if you want. I can talk to Chris about that, yeah. Haber's brand new, they may have some new staff there that aren't sure what,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah,
Maybe you were going to cover this another time. There's something about, that I read but can't reconnect with, about after a certain date, any public meetings that a candidate attends, they have to previously
Yes.
announce to, were you going to cover that somewhere else?
No, I wasn't going to, but yeah, that's a good point. I was nodding because it's like, yes, that's right, I think I meant to cover that. So when we talk about the use of corporate resources, after July 1st in Burlington, July 1st is a pretty key date, the current members of council can, you'll notice their web page on our city site will be stripped down to just, who to contact and all of that sort of thing. Their newsletters and all of that are no longer done by city staff, or distributed by us or put on their webpage. They need to take care of that themselves if they do that. And any public meetings or open houses or city, not like a big event, but where it's like a formal event where there is staff introducing members of council, if you go tell the organizer that you are there, they will also introduce you. But you have to initiate that with the organizer because the staff don't know every single person who's running or what you look like. But for public meetings under the Planning Act, if you go tell the planning staff that are there, they will, your name and everything, and they will introduce you as well as members of council.
You can be introduced, but you don't have to declare as a candidate that you're at a particular meeting. It's about the opportunity to be introduced.
That's right. It's just about leveling the playing field, and that's only if that was part of the agenda to introduce members of council. So there may be something that staff, like Sound of Music, I'm sure there's going to be a ton of things going on, and I don't think they introduce anybody at most of it. But if you are there where that is part of the agenda to introduce, then you would be introduced, could be introduced if you asked. Yes, at the back there.
On the basis of that last question, though, if one opportunity is provided to a candidate, it must be provided to all candidates by law.
Yes.
So why is it necessary for the candidates to identify themselves?
Well,
Wouldn't you just take the candidates off the city's registered candidates list and notify them there?
so the people that are organizing the event may not know which candidates are in the room or what you look like to be able to identify you. So we need you to identify yourself to that staff person.
But if the council members are present at an event,
Yes.
they're invited, aren't they? Or they just show up, and because they show up, they're...
Well, all of the events are posted, all of the public meetings are posted on the website, and there isn't really a whole lot after July 1st that council gets specifically invited to. They may be holding their own public meeting, which they've organized themselves. If it's a public meeting under the Planning Act, they would be aware of it, as well as all the residents within 120 meters and whoever we're required to notify. Any other questions? Great. Do you want to do the tabulator?
Sure, but I'll just add that in
Okay.
Oakville, the cutoff date is nomination day,
Oh.
not July.
Right, for the...
Newsletters and stuff.
So this is our tabulator. You're going to have to come up and have a look because you're not going to be able to see it.
This is a makeshift ballot box. It is nothing like the real ballot box. So our ballot box, we use the Oakville stands so high, so it's easy. Yeah, sure. It's just that you're not going to be able to see the ballot or the machine from the distance. You can actually pass the ballot around and let everybody have a look at it. These are just City of Anywhere ballots. So that we can test and play and come up with the procedures that we wrote for you. Face down into the tabulation. And you see now, because I stuck the secrecy folder in, that's why ours are different. And it gives you a message. It said multiple sheets are detected. So it gives me an option, okay, take it out. And then I could feed it back in, but it would be in the secrecy folder, but this is just for demonstration purposes. Comes out the back, it's calculating, spits it in, drops into the box. And then on the top here, it says one ballot has been cast. That increments throughout the day. From advanced voting, every day is a continuous day. We don't start from scratch because we don't ever total the results until 8 o'clock on voting day night when everything's closed. So we just feed them in. So after the first day, if there's 150 ballots, then the next day it starts at 150 ballots. So we have to have forms and procedures in place for them to write down the numbers, feed them in, and just go through it. And that, in a nutshell, is our tabulator. It's a great little machine. It works. It's really easy. You can feed your ballot in, spits it out the back. This is the tape that will be posted on the wall with results. There'll be one that we keep and one that we post. So the first one in the morning is the zeros total, and the one at the end of the night has the totals on. So all the scrutineers that are in the location can get that information, and they go phone it back in, and they have the results faster than we do for some. I don't know how it works.
Most of the time.
Yes, most of the time. During our advance votes, there's also a printer that sits on the top of the ballot box. There's an audio component and a braille plus sip and puff and paddle, so that for accessibility purposes, people can use that. And you can actually have somebody sitting to the side with the audio and their equipment, and they can be casting their ballot at the same time that you can feed a ballot in and be counted. And then when they're finished, their ballot will print. and it's got random marks, so they look like they're homemade marks, so that they can't be distinguished from the ballots that other voters are filling out. So if anybody ever had to go through that box, they wouldn't be able to determine which was an accessible ballot and which was not, which is much better, because if you only have one person using an accessible ballot, their ballot goes in the box with everybody else's, and it's not an audio ballot as opposed to a paper ballot. If you have any questions, if you want to try and feed a ballot in, feel free. And that's it.
What happens with a spoiled ballot? You ask for a new ballot.
If
What do you
there's
do
a
with the
spoiled
spoiled ballot?
We have a process that we would write spoiled or canceled, and we would put it in an envelope.
And when are they seen by scrutineers at all, or
If there is
anyone?
a scrutineer in the location, we would do that right in front of the scrutineer. If you were there, we would say, we have a voter that's voted, you can't see the ballot, but we are going to mark it,
Mhm.
and we're putting it in this envelope, and this envelope goes back with our supplies, it never goes in the box, and then we issue another ballot.
So then on the printout, is there a reconciliation on the basis of how many ballots went through, how many spoiled ballots went
Because
through?
if it's a spoiled ballot, it won't go through, and it doesn't go through.
It spits back out, so it doesn't count it.
Doesn't register.
Right,
Doesn't
but it goes in
register
the,
on
it goes in the envelope, and at the end of the night, the DRO has to balance with the number of spoiled ballots in the envelope, with the number that, they have to count their ballots before they start in the day. So they've got 100 ballots, they've got 3 spoiled and 70 cast, they need to have, 20 whatever,
You can
my
see,
math,
I just
left.
spoiled this ballot, you can see, came back,
Okay,
and it's got a message, it says invalid ballot detected.
yes.
Verify the ballot, because you can't ever read a ballot that's defective through the machine. It won't count it, it won't add up.
Well,
on the-
I understand that it will, take a tally on basis of what is spoiled and advise you at that point. It's a reconciliation in terms of the number of spoiled ballots, ballots cast, ballots sent to the location.
So
Well,
the
on your
DRO
final-
needs to balance those at the end of the
At the
night.
end of the night, that
So
would
they
all
go
be-
through all the ones in the envelope of spoiled ballots and count those towards their overall ballot count.
Okay.
That's how they balance. And we give them a form, so they have it each laid out, the number cast,
Yeah.
the number blank left over,
Mhm.
the number spoiled. We usually label the envelopes, I don't know how Oakville does
We
it.
do,
You do
too.
envelope A,
Yep.
envelope B, that
Ours
kind
are
of thing.
canceled, spoiled.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
it. They're all
And then they all
labeled.
come back to the clerk
Okay.
in sealed envelopes.
Well, the voter that had the spoiled ballot is sitting right there, and they would get to read.
They can
Yeah.
choose to get a new ballot, yes, if they want to,
So the spoiled ballot is really just surplus everything.
yes.
It is, because it's out of the equation, and what counts is what's in your box, and that's secure and gets sealed as soon as this machine is removed at the end of the night. So nothing can be counted that didn't go through into that box.
Excellent.
But you always have the option that some voter comes into your location and they leave and they take their ballot with them and you don't know. You're not going to ballot. But you count that ballot. You might be one short, but it's not in that box and it's not on that count. So you wouldn't, it's not something you have to be concerned if it's not going through the machine.
Okay.
That's the beauty of tabulators as opposed to a paper box.
Yeah, but with the old paper boxes, you could physically, the scrutineer can see every vote as it was being counted. Now you
Well, they
can't.
can stand and watch every one and watch it increment by one every time somebody picks the ballot.
Yes, but at the end of the night, the ballot box, all the counted ballots are not seen by anyone.
No, they're
Ever
not.
again.
No, they're not. That's the one difference. But
That's
the
a pretty big
accuracy,
difference.
the accuracy of this machine, for the testing it goes through, is 100 times more accurate than somebody that's been working for 12 hours and their counting ability at the end of a night or at 2 o'clock in the morning, as it used to be, and they would count them 16 times and come up with a different number every time. And that's actually been proven in court through recounts, yes. Which
Well,
is-
I've been a scrutineer before in Burlington here. I've never seen a poll open until 2 a.m., but
Well, I'll tell you.
I must have missed that one.
You must have, because I was at one.
Yes. Yeah, first
Many
elect,
years
yeah.
ago.
When I first started working elections, they were all done manually, just like Kim, and the results are coming in at 11, 11:30, midnight.
And
They,
there was one problem location.
yeah, because they couldn't balance, and every time they counted, it was different, and, yeah.
And the testing is rigorous, like it really is. So there is no I wouldn't be doing this if there was any question. It wouldn't be.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Very much.
You did a great job. Thank you.